Yeah, I mean, I've been in the state legislature here in Wisconsin for coming up on just over 6 years now, and it's been kind of a wild ride. And I'm from the Milwaukee area, but before that, my story really starts about around age 14 or so when I started um, volunteering at a local youth homeless shelter called Pathfinders, and then I ended up getting a paid position there throughout high school, and worked and volunteered in a myriad of other social service agencies, mostly other homeless shelters, including kind of like domestic violence type situations or family shelters, stuff like that. And then after my high school experience was over and I graduated, I would go on to do a year of AmeriCorps service at another shelter, at a 20-bed, 2 to 3 month family shelter, through that year, as well as continue my volunteer service. And that really kind of paved the way for what I would be doing for the rest of my life. And really, it was that time in high school and being around other youth that were from the same city as me mostly, and just might have had grown up, a couple miles over here, over there, but had a wildly different life experience through no, fault of their own, but just kind of how everything played out for everyone. And it was a pretty stark, you know, uh, example of how incredibly unfair certain parts of our society were at that, even as a teenager at that time. And that's pretty much what I decided from then on, that I wanted to kind of dedicate my work and my life towards. And as I got a little bit older and after my AmeriCorps experience, I realized more and had a little bit better understanding of the important role that government plays in both resource allocation as well as basically just setting the rules of society, and what can and can't be done. And decided I wanted to get a little more experience in there. So I would go on to have experience at the United Nations, because I was pretty interested in international relations, international aid at that time. And then at the municipal level, at the city, as well as at the county, as a staffer. And then at the Senate as the district director for the Senate minority leader. And briefly in Washington, D.C. for Senator Harkin, who used to be the senator out of Iowa, alongside Chuck Grassley back then. And then there was an opportunity for an open seat for my state representative, who was running for attorney general at the time. And so I ran for his seat and got elected. And I've been kind of transferring that work into what I do at the legislature and bringing that energy towards my work here. But really, it's the same thing. It's just as you get a little bit older, you get more capability and therefore more responsibility, and you get a little more tools in your toolbox to do stuff with. But it's pretty much the same stuff I've been doing since I was 14, just scaled up, I'd say, a little bit to a certain extent. So yeah, that's kind of my background and why I got working on this work. But I think one of the biggest, if we're talking about human rights, and I know there's also the religious kind of freedom side to it, but just really talking about the human rights side of things, I think it's pretty impossible to have that discussion in America right now, especially without talking about police brutality and really this kind of pivotal moment that we're in, where there's been, I think, a conflux of different events coming together to create this situation. And part of that is, having over, almost 2 decades of cell phone recordings of police brutality, where, before, for certain parts of America, that didn't exist, or police are just the good guys that give out bubble gum at parades and stuff like that or whatever. And for people who weren't white in America, there could be wildly different experiences in that regard. But, there was this very different life experience. And I experienced this myself, growing up in Milwaukee, but going to almost exclusively, Black schools. In my experience, especially as a teenager, my time with cops was way different than a lot of my, colleagues and classmates. And, I think for people who have even less experience, for people in different situations, it's just there was just a total disconnect happening there. But now it's impossible to ignore, to pretend it's not happening, because there's so much direct footage of it. So that's one aspect. I think that there's a couple of unique aspects that have all led to this situation, and now there's really a moment in history, and that's what I've kind of focused a lot of my legislative efforts on. And I, was in Milwaukee. We've had pretty consecutive marches, and before my second son was born, and and just personally, we having lost now three, family members, two relatively close family members to COVID, as well as my best friend growing up, who was in relatively good shape and, was only in his 30s when he died, and stuff like that. I haven't been, but before that I was out, pretty much 100 days consecutively with the marchers here. And, as a legislator, it's a little bit of a different role to play, and you have a lot, especially as a white legislator, to, do as far as keeping everyone safe and, letting the police know, what's up and stuff like that or whatever, but also, listening directly to all sorts of stories. And every single person who's out there had a very good reason to be out there, and everyone had all sorts of different experiences and stuff like that to tell, but also getting a lot of good legislative ideas. And I've had this cycle 24 bills drafted now, in regard to fixing the situation and making things better. And I'm going to be rolling all of them out now that they've been drafted. And yesterday, myself, as well as a myriad of other Democratic legislators, were able to introduce ending qualified immunity in Wisconsin, which is obviously a huge one. And one of the ways, speaking about human rights, that police are able to violate the constitutional rights of the people they're supposed to be serving, quite frankly, and get away with it over and over and over. So anyway, I have a bunch of different bills I'm working on, and I know my time's tight, but I think this is something that is a real moment in history, an opportunity to not necessarily, you can never go backwards in the harm that's been done. You can't just say, well, fixing stuff moving forward, you can undo it, but we can try and prevent harm moving forward from other people, as well as try to make things right in other areas. And I think it's incumbent upon all of us to recognize that significant human rights violations been going on in America pretty much since our inception, and use this moment and this energy to do something about it.